Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So week one of our summer nutrition series, we want to start basically with the basics, like I mentioned in the email that I sent out on Monday. So we're going to kick everything off talking about macronutrients. And then next week, we're going to talk about metabolism, and you'll get more on that in your weekly email next week. So today, what I kind of want to go over with everyone today is just basically what are macronutrients, if for those of you who have never heard that. And then we're going to talk about the three primary macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And then I want to go over some food guides and how to build your plate. And then we'll briefly talk about workout nutrition guidelines too as well. So like I said, starting off with what are macronutrients? So in many ways, our bodies can kind of be thought of as like a chemical processing plant. Chemicals are taken in, they're processed through various types of reactions, and then they're distributed throughout the body to be used immediately or stored for later use. So the chemicals that are used by the body can be divided into two broad categories, macronutrients and micronutrients. And actually, week 3, we're going to talk about micronutrients. Carrie will be here to talk about that. So we'll get into greater detail on that too as well. Don't think we're just going to ignore them. So macronutrients, those are those substances that we need to eat regularly in a fairly large quantity. And then micronutrients, those are the substances that we need only in small amounts. And the 3 major classes of macronutrients that are essential for us, like I said, are carbohydrates, fats, and protein. So let's start right off the bat with carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates, otherwise known as carbs? They are basically sugar molecules. Your body breaks down carbs into glucose. And glucose, if you've heard it also referred to as blood sugar, it's the main source of energy for your body's cells, your tissues, and your organs. And it can be used immediately or stored in the liver and muscles for later use. So to kind of break things down a little bit, simple sugars. All carbohydrates are made up of units of sugar, also called saccharide units. And simple sugars are sweet in taste, and they're broken down quickly in the body to release energy. Carbohydrates that contain only 1 sugar unit, which is a monosaccharide, or 2 sugar units, which is a disaccharide, those are going to be what we refer to as simple sugars. 2 of the most common monosaccharides are going to be glucose and fructose. I'm going to get a little sciencey on you. So glucose is the primary form of sugar, and that's what's stored in the human body for energy. And then fructose is the main sugar found in most fruits. And then looking at disaccharides, those are the ones that have the 2 sugar units that are bonded together. For example, common table sugar is also called sucrose. That's a disaccharide that consists of glucose, which is also bonded with fructose. So just kind of a little background on that. And then aside from simple sugars, there are complex sugars. So there's a lot more to carbohydrates than just the word carbs. So complex carbohydrates are polymers of simple sugars. So in other words, complex carbs are long chains of those simple sugar units that are bonded together. And starch is going to be the principal polysaccharide that's used by plants. So they use that to store glucose for later use as energy. And plants often store starch in seeds or other specialized organs. For example, common starches are going to be like your rice, beans, wheat, corn, potatoes, and so on. When humans eat starch, an enzyme that occurs in our saliva and in the intestines called amylase, it breaks down those bonds of all of those glucose, those sugar units, and that allows sugar to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So once that's in the bloodstream, the human body can distribute that glucose to the areas where we need it for our energy, or it can store it. And when it's stored, that's when we kind of call it glycogen, glycogen, instead of glucose. So that's just another polymer of it. It's a polysaccharide, and it's used by animals to store energy. And excess glucose is bonded together to form glycogen molecules, and that's where we store that in the liver and muscle tissues, and that's kind of our instant source of energy. So that's why we'll get to this too, but whenever we're done working out, we want to refuel with those carbohydrates because it's that instant energy that our muscles need after a really good workout. So the 3 main types of carbohydrates kind of dabbled on it a little bit. So there's sugars, another, again, simple carbohydrates because they're the most basic form. They can be added to food, such as, the sugar that we have in candy, desserts, processed foods, and soda. And they also include the kinds of sugar that are found naturally in fruits, vegetables, and milk. And then starches, which I mentioned too as well, those are our complex carbs. And those are going to be made up of lots of simple sugars that are strung together. Your body needs to break down starches into sugars to use them. And again, that's bread, cereal, pasta. Some vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn are also considered starch. And then fiber, that's also a complex carbohydrate. And your body can't break down most fibers. So eating foods with fiber in it, that's what helps us feel really full and makes us less likely to overeat. So diets or meal plans that we're following that are high in fiber have really good health benefits for us. They can prevent stomach or intestinal problems such as constipation. They can help lower cholesterol and blood sugar. And fiber is found in many foods that come from plants, including fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, and whole grains. So just to kind of break everything down and combine it all together. So the foods that have carbohydrates, we've got our grains. So bread, noodles, pasta, crackers, cereal, and rice. Our fruits, apples, bananas, berries, so on. Dairy products as well, milk and yogurt. Legumes, so you got your dried beans, lentils, and peas. And then our snacky and sweet foods, and then juices, and then starchy vegetables such as potatoes, corn, and peas. Some foods don't have a lot of carbohydrates, such as meat, fish, poultry, and then like cheese, nuts, and oils, and things like that too. So these are going to be our main foods that have carbohydrates. So you do need to eat some carbohydrates to give your body energy, but it's important that you're eating the right kinds of carbohydrates for your health. So whole grains is something that we really stress. They're better sources than refined grains of fiber and other important nutrients like B vitamins, basically. Refined grains go through a process that strips out parts of the grain, along with a lot of the nutrients and the fiber. But whole grains are foods like whole wheat bread, brown rice, whole cornmeal, and oatmeal. And they're going to give us a lot more bang for our buck because they've got those nutrients that your body needs and they weren't stripped in that refined process. So we're going to get all the vitamins, minerals, and the full fiber. You can always check the ingredient list on a package to see if it's whole grain and make sure that's like the first item that you see too. And later on in our nutrition summer series, we do talk about nutrition labels and we'll give you some tips to look out for on that too as well. And then fiber. We want whole, fresh, frozen, or canned fruits and vegetables without all that added sugar. Fruit juices and dried fruits are still good sources, but we want to have that concentrated source of natural sugar. So we have to watch out for that. Whole fruits and vegetables also are going to add fiber, water, and bulk, which again helps you feel full. And then legumes, beans, peas, and lentils, those are very versatile and nutritious food options that are available. They're typically low in fat, high in folate, potassium, iron, and magnesium, which a lot of us tend to be deficient in. So that's a super easy way to get those. And then, of course, they've got beneficial fats and fibers too as well. And they can be a really good source of protein and a good substitute for meat. And then we, of course, want to try to avoid those foods that have a lot of added sugar. These have a lot of calories and not much nutrition. And we know that eating too much sugar is going to raise your blood sugar and can make you gain weight for over a long period of time if we're consistently eating those foods with added sugars in them. So that's just one of the things we want to watch out for. So whole grains, eating foods with fiber, and legumes are going to be the big things we want to focus on when it comes to carbs. We know that carbohydrates can be a great source of energy. They're the primary source of fuel for your brain and your body during really high intense activities. And the amount of carbohydrates you need depends on your goals, your biology, and your intensity and duration of your activity. So this is kind of a big takeaway item. And don't worry, we'll send all of this out to everybody so you don't have to take notes or try to write all of this down. But we do want to try to focus on, again, getting at least 35 grams of fiber each day. Choosing foods that have at least 3 grams of fiber per serving is a really good way to get you up to that 35. And then, of course, looking for products with minimal added sugars. And just a rule of thumb, 1 serving of carbohydrates is usually about 15 grams if you're looking at that nutrition label, which again, we'll break down. I believe it's week 4. We've got that planned for that too as well. So then these are just some examples of some servings of carbohydrates that we've already kind of discussed. So next we are going to move on to fats. Whew, that is brighter than I thought it was. Wake up, everybody. Okay, so what are fats? Fats are a subgroup of compounds known as lipids, and they're found in the body, and they've got the general property of being hydrophobic, which means it's insoluble in water. Fats are also known as triglycerides. Those are molecules made from the combination of one molecule of glycerol with 3 fatty acids. So I kind of have a little theme here. I get a little sciencey on you at the beginning just to give you a background. So the purpose of fats. The main purpose of fats in the body is to serve as a storage system and to reserve supply of energy. So during periods of low food consumption, fat reserves in the body can be mobilized and broken down to release energy, but your body does not really prefer that. It would rather have that medium to high food consumption, or eating, over a period of time, breaking up your food throughout the day and not starving yourself, because we don't want to go to those fat reserves. We don't want to have to break those down for energy. Other purposes of fats, they also serve as an insulation material. So that allows the body to heat up, to be conserved, and fats line and protect delicate internal organs from physical damage. Fats in the diet can be converted to other lipids that serve as the main structural material of all of our membranes surrounding our cells. So they kind of keep that structure and integrity too as well. And they're also used to manufacture some steroids and hormones that regulate proper growth and maintenance of body tissue. So long story short, fats are very important for us. We don't want to not consume those. The types of fats, they can be classified as either saturated or unsaturated, depending on the structure of the carbon chains in the fatty acids. And other forms of fats are also trans fats too as well. So let's start with saturated fats. So fats that contain no double bonds in their chains, these are referred to as the saturated fats. These tend to be solid at room temperature, so think of butter or animal fat. The consumption of saturated fats carries some health risk with it, that it's been linked to hardening of the arteries and heart disease. So we want to watch out for saturated fats. And then unsaturated fats, these contain some number of double bonds in their structure. These are generally liquid at room temperature, so think of this as oil. Unsaturated fats can either be polyunsaturated, so that just means basically a lot of double bonds, or monounsaturated, so one or few. Recent research actually suggests that the healthiest of the fats in the human diet are monounsaturated fats, like olive oil and canola oil, because they are super beneficial in fighting against heart disease. So not all fats are created equal, just like with our carbs, with all of our sugars too as well. So what foods have fat? So your saturated fats are going to be your red meat. If you eat the skin of chicken, whole fat dairy products, butter, ice cream, lard, and tropical oil, so like coconut oil. And then trans fats, these are our pastries, our cookies, our donuts, list goes on, all of that good stuff, right? And fried foods, butter, shortening, different things like that. And then breaking it down further, our monounsaturated fats, these are olive, canola, peanut, and sesame oils, avocados, olives, some nuts like almonds, peanuts, pecans, cashews, and then nut butter. And polyunsaturated fats, this is going to be sunflower, sesame, and pumpkin seeds, flaxseed, walnuts, salmon, tuna, mackerel, soy milk, and tofu. So you can kind of see the difference between this slide and the one before it. This slide are the fats that are going to be the ones that we want to really try to aim for when we're getting that healthy serving of fats that we need. So monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats are known as the good fats, like I just said, because they're good for your heart, your cholesterol, and your overall health. So the big takeaway for fats, they contain powerful nutrients and antioxidants for repair of our joints, our organs, our skin, and our hair. They help release energy slowly to the body. So kind of like fiber, it keeps you feeling fuller longer. It helps regulate blood sugar, stabilizes your energy levels. And fats are also needed for absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And those are carried in food and absorbed into and carried by the bloodstream. So again, we'll send you all of this stuff too, but typically one serving of fat is about 7 grams of fat. And those are just some ideas to show you our options of servings of fat right there. And proteins, our final one. So what are proteins? They are polymers of amino acids. There are hundreds of thousands of different proteins that exist in nature, and they're all made up of different combinations of amino acids. So proteins are really large molecules that consist of a bunch of amino acids, which we're going to get to kind of a little bit. I'll explain that here coming up. When many amino acids bond together to create long chains, the structure is called a protein. So another word for that is also polypeptide. So structural part of the proteins, the two main purposes of the human body for proteins, structural, good Lord, I cannot talk. That forms most of the solid material in the human body. So basically structural proteins, keratin and collagen, are the main component of your hair, muscles, tendons, and skin. So when we think of protein, we've got functional proteins and we have structural proteins. So keratin and collagen, I'm sure a lot of us have heard about that. And then functional, that helps carry out activities and functions in the human body. For example, hemoglobin, that's a functional protein that occurs in the red blood cells and that transports oxygen to the body. Myosin is also a protein and that occurs in muscle tissue. And that's responsible for the ability of our muscles to contract. And then insulin, that's another functional protein that helps regulate the storage of sugar glucose in the human body. And then a subclass of functional proteins is also called enzymes, and that word might be pretty familiar to some people too. Those basically just carry out specific chemical reactions in the body. So for example, amylase, that's an enzyme that occurs both in human saliva and the intestines, and I kind of brought this up earlier, that helps you break apart those glucose bonds and carbohydrate starches. And that allows your body to absorb that glucose and use it for energy. So enzymes are just little subclasses of proteins. And the purpose of proteins, there are an estimated 100,000 different proteins in the body alone. So I think a lot of people think of protein and they just think of, what's on your slide, chicken or protein powder, but proteins do so much more for you than just what we think of when we think of protein. They're all made up of a combination of different combinations of those 20 amino acids. Each protein has a different structure and it performs a different function in the body. When we eat protein-containing foods, like meat, fish, beans, eggs, and cheese, the chains of the protein are broken down into the digestive tract, and the individual amino acids are absorbed into our body. So these amino acids are then basically recombined into proteins specific to each individual person in a process called protein synthesis. So that's super cool. When we're consuming proteins, they get broken down and they get basically broken down into those amino acids, and those are absorbed into our bodies, and our bodies just know what to do with them based on our lifestyle, how active we are, what we are doing that day, what we've been eating, just different things like that. So protein synthesis is a really cool process. And your body also uses the amino acids from the food to build and repair muscles and bones, to make hormones and enzymes, and they can also be used as an energy source. Just like fat can be used as an energy source, protein is one we really don't want to dabble in. Think of being lost in the mountains for weeks and you are starved and you are thirsty and your body is trying to get all the energy that it can. Protein is the absolute last place your body will take protein from. So we definitely don't want to take that from that, because that's what makes us lose our muscle mass and we lose all of that strength too as well. So what foods have proteins? Different foods contain different amounts of those essential amino acids. Animal products, so chicken, beef, fish, and dairy, those have all of the essential amino acids. And so those are kind of known as complete proteins. Basically, they're ideal or they're really high quality protein. And then soy products, quinoa, amaranth, and and others have essential amino acids in them too as well. Tofu, edamame, tempeh, things like that. And then plant proteins, so your beans, lentils, nuts, and whole grains, those usually lack at least one of the essential amino acids. So those are considered incomplete proteins. So if you ever heard of someone calling something a complete protein source, it's basically just, does it have all of the essential amino acids that we need? So what types of protein should you be eating? You've got our lean meats of beef, lamb, veal, and pork, poultry of chicken, turkey, and duck, fish and seafood, eggs, dairy products, nuts and seeds, legumes and beans, and soy products. So I know a lot of people instantly think of meat sources of protein, but don't forget about the eggs, dairy, nuts, legumes, and soy products. Those have a lot of protein in them too as well. So our big takeaway for protein Protein supports the building of lean mass, but they're much more versatile, helping with hormone production, immune function, and enzymes that power key functions in the body. So generally, one serving of protein has about 20 grams of protein, and you'll find 20 grams of protein in 3 ounces of meat or fish, 2 eggs, and so on and so forth with that list. And a lot of times your protein intake is going to depend on how active you are too as well. But the minimal requirements of protein, you usually want to take about 0.5 to 1 gram per pound of your body weight per day. And like I said, it's going to depend on how old you are, your activity, and different things like that for how much protein you need in a day. And then of course you want to space out that protein intake too as well. We don't want to have our body going through a lot trying to digest too much protein at one time. So let's look into like a little nice food guide, which will be cool once we send these slides to you so you can take a look at those too as well. These are just some of our favorite sources of quality nutrients that are going to come from protein, carbs, and fats too as well. And it breaks everything down really nicely for you. So again, you'll get this. You don't have to write anything down quickly. And then moving on to building plates. So building plates, again, we've stressed this, with how many macronutrients you need, there is no one size fits all. Everyone is different. Everyone's activity level is different. Your job is different if you're sedentary or if you're a construction worker, how old you are, how tall you are, how much you weigh. All of these different things go into building your own individual plate. So a lot of times people want to try to set their macros, or if you've heard of if it fits your macros, there's a lot of science that goes into that to figure out exactly how much your body should be taking, but we just want to make it kind of as easy and as simple as possible. So we've got this little plate here, and if you are a moderately active individual, you want to try to frame all of your main meals with 1/3 of a plate of colorful produce, 1/3 of a plate of that lean protein source, and then fiber-rich carbohydrates. If you are super active, you're going to want a lot more carbohydrates to refuel you after your really active day. So that's, again, if you are partaking in heavy physical activity, if you're a construction worker, you're always on your feet, different things like that, it's just going to structure your plate differently in what you need. And then if you're not as active, maybe you don't consider yourself sedentary, you're just not as active as you would consider a moderately active individual, or maybe you're trying to lose weight, then your focus of carbohydrates is going to be more on those colorful produce options, our fruits and our vegetables, and then our minimal carbohydrates. Think of these as like our fiber-rich carbohydrates, our whole grains and our rice. And then you've got your lean protein too as well. And if you ever want to get to know, basically get to know yourself more, what your plate should look like, your activity levels, different things like that, you can always reach out to me or Carrie, and that's what we're here for. We can help you figure out a plan that's going to work for you to make sure you're fueling yourself with all 3 of these macronutrients. That's the big thing we want to stress. We don't take any of these away. So kind of going into how your workout and how active you are kind of goes into everything. We've got some workout guidelines for your nutrition too as well. So looking at your pre-workout, it kind of depends on what your workout is going to be. If you are just going to partake in yoga or a very light walk, you may not need to focus on consuming something before you go work out. But if you are going to have a moderate or high intensity training session, having a small size like meal or snack that gets digested prior to your workout is going to help you fuel you to power you through that workout, so you're not feeling that fatigue and not as strong as you can be during your workout. So pre-workout nutrition really depends on what your workout for that day is going to be. And then post-workout nutrition, protein and carbohydrates are definitely included in our post-activity meals and snacks, starting with that serving of protein and adding carbohydrates too as well, really depending again on how long your workout actually was. So if this seems complicated or you want to get to know more about yourself and what you're kind of doing, definitely reach out to us and we'll help. We do have kind of a little guide here. Depending on how much you weigh, you can kind of get a rough estimate of what your protein, your carbohydrates needs would be post-workout. Kind of have a little ratio here too as well, depending on your workout. And then just some really good options of some quick ways to get to those carbohydrates too, like smoothies are always a really good choice, and fruit and different things like that. So that's just a really quick guide that we're not going to spend too much time on, But if you have questions, definitely reach out to us and we can set up a phone or a Zoom or whatever kind of consultation you would like to as well. So that kind of wraps everything up. If anyone has any questions, if you want to unmute yourself and chat, you definitely can, or you can use the chat feature. Otherwise, if no one has any questions, our emails are there on the screen.